Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. In this season of Awesome Movie Year, we're talking about the films of 1989. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris. I'm a filmmaker. I am a comedian, and I am well regarded in the world of kabuki.
I feel like you were just like stalling to come up with something there, and I'm glad that you got to kabuki.
I put words together and they made sense.
Yeah, well, that's debatable.
If you want to hire me for some artistic kabuki interpretations, then you know where to find me.
Yeah, find Jason.
Jason Harris Kabuki.
Yeah, jasonharriskabuki.com.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good.
At Jason Harris Kabuki on all the socials.
So in this episode of our season on the films of 1989, we're talking about the Palme d'Or winner at the Cannes Film Festival, Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And as we mentioned in our last episode, which was our filmmaking debut episode, this is also, it could have been covered there because it was Steven Soderbergh's first film and quite a debut on his part, really.
Yeah, unless you want to count the quintessential Yes concert documentary 9021 Live or whatnot.
That is a good point.
Which I do not.
No, I don't think that counts. So, but it doesn't matter because that's not what the criteria are for this.
Didn't make the cut, buddy.
No, but it did make the cut at the Cannes Film Festival where it won the Palme d'Or as well as the Best Actor Award for James Spader. And I think more so than being at Cannes, it's known for being at the Sundance Film Festival in 1989, which happened a few months before Cannes, where it did not win the Grand Jury Prize. And we're going to talk about that movie in a later episode this season. It did, however, win the Audience Award at Sundance and really was hugely instrumental in putting Sundance on the map.
Yeah, I mean, talk about... it was one of those, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, right? It was beneficial to both the festival and the film. Like they both blew each other up at the same time.
Right. I think that is true. And I mean, we had our 1994 season and we talked about Pulp Fiction and Clerks, and Sundance probably blew up even more in the 90s, but this was really the beginning of it becoming such a huge deal.
I think, yeah, I'm no historian, Josh.
No, you're just a kabuki guy.
But if I was to combine my love of kabuki and history, no. But I think, yeah, if you were going to go over the history of Sundance, this is the movie that kind of pivoted it from like, oh, this is a cool little indie festival in the woods in the winter of Utah, to, oh, now every agent or talent manager or studio head is going to be here because they might find the next Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Right. This is the place where that kind of stuff gets discovered. And thanks to its success at Sundance and at Cannes, it became a box office success. It grossed $36.7 million on a budget of just $1.2 million. So that's a huge success. And especially for a movie like this, that I feel like even today, I would be amazed at this movie or making that much money.
It might be even harder today for this movie to make this movie.
Yeah.
I think Soderbergh's had a few in his career where you're like, oh, he's really outkicked the coverage of the expected total gross of these films.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's made plenty of weird, obscure things that didn't make money, but there are certainly movies in his career where he just follows his own weird muse and it turns out to be successful in a sort of unlikely way. And this movie continued its success at the Oscars. It was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, although it lost to Dead Poets Society, which I have not seen, but I feel like there's a lot of writing in Dead Poets Society. So that's
maybe some poetry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also up for that was Do the Right Thing, Crimes and Misdemeanors, and When Harry Met Sally. So
yeah, that's quite a category.
It's a big time category.
So no shame in losing there.
Nope.
Also nominated for 3 Golden Globes for Best Original Screenplay as well, along with Best Actress for Andie MacDowell and Best Supporting Actress for Laura San Giacomo. It did not win any of those either, but certainly broke out far beyond this indie film world.
And it won Independent Spirit Awards for Best Picture, Director, Female Lead, and Supporting Female. And Spader as the male lead lost to Matt Dillon in Drugstore Cowboy, another good movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Peter Gallagher, no love on this one, huh?
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about him. He's fine in this. So, but it was interesting to me. I think I had not remembered. I knew it was a big deal on the indie circuit, but I hadn't remembered that it had actually sort of permeated into that mainstream awards conversation.
Well, not just that, you were talking about, how much money it made. It was also not just made that much money. It was making at one point $38,995 per showing per theater. That's pretty impressive, man, for any movie. But for like a little indie movie in 1989 before the internet and everything, that's quite a feat.
Right. I mean, for word to spread about this movie because it was a limited release. And I mean, I think this is similar to when we talked about Clerks in our 1994 season, that it never went wide on the level of like a blockbuster, but just it picked up that momentum of people seeing it at the festivals and then seeing it in major cities, and then it gets reported on, and by the time it makes it to a smaller market, it people know that this is like a cool thing to see.
Yeah.
So had you seen this movie before?
Yeah, I actually took a class in college on Spike Lee and Steven Soderbergh, like a major figures class. So the first time I saw it was there from UNLV professor Francisco Menendez.
Oh, shout out to Francisco Menendez,
who very good professor of these major figure classes.
Yeah. So did you watch this along with like Do the Right Thing because of them being in the same year?
Yeah. Well, we watched pretty much everything from those filmmakers at that point in time. So
that's a lot.
Well, yeah, I had counted the other day when I was doing research. I think I've seen like 22 Steven Soderbergh movies.
Yeah, I've seen almost all of his movies.
Which is just the fact that like 22 out of 30. The fact that he's put out 30 movies is pretty incredible.
He's a very prolific guy.
Yeah, and he had retired for a few years.
Right, and yeah, he's still made like 4 movies since then, I think, since his retirement.
Yeah, but no, we watched everything, the beginning from this, The Underneath, Kafka, King of the Hill, Schizopolis, which I don't think anyone that I know has seen besides me. Did you see that?
I've seen it, yeah.
I don't think anyone I know besides me and you, Josh. No.
Dave, have you seen Schizopolis?
I can't say that I have.
All right. And then, Grey's Anatomy's in there, which I have not seen.
I haven't either.
But
I've seen the documentary Now parody of it, though.
Okay, there you go. And then, after Schizopolis comes that great break in his career, which he kind of needed. And then he reinvents himself with Out of Sight, and then it's off to the races, baby.
Yeah, we can name every single one of his movies. Maybe in our legacy section we'll just do that.
Well, I'm just saying that was like the 2 periods of his
career. Right. I mean, and he's probably had multiple periods of his career kind of as that's gone on, and is in this weird post-retirement period right now.
When did you see it for the first time?
I don't know exactly. It might have been when I was in college, not for a college class, but I think, as we were talking about with Cameron Crowe in the last episode, I had seen later Soderbergh films, probably Out of Sight or Aaron Brockovich or Traffic, and just love them so much. So I wanted to go back and see his early work. So this would have been one that I watched along with Schizopolis, maybe. And I think at the time, like I didn't remember, not only did I not remember a whole lot about like the movie itself, but I didn't really remember my reaction to it. I don't know how much I liked it when I first saw it.
I remember liking it, but I definitely didn't remember much of the movie.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of it was fairly fresh to me coming back to it this time.
Dave, did you watch this one?
No, the cheapest I could find it was $12.99. I was like, I'm not watching it. Sorry,
I invited
guys.
you over to watch it.
You did, but that's,
Yeah, that's way more effort than Dave can put into watching a movie.
Well, I thought we were going to be on a streak with him, but the streak
we got one.
You got one.
You got one.
Not much of a streak.
We'll see what happens as the season goes on.
Josh, that's an anomaly, not a streak.
Right.
If it's just one, that's
yeah,
that's the exception to the rule.
That's a fair assessment of that. So I was interested looking up reviews of this movie because we think of this as such a highly acclaimed film, winning those awards at the film festivals and the Oscar nominations. But a lot of stuff that I found was somewhat mixed on this movie when it was first being released in theaters. Roger Ebert liked it, but I have a couple excerpts because I think he brings up something interesting. And so I wanted to kind of look at 2 perspectives from him. So he said, the early stages of Sex, Lies, and Videotape are a languorous but intriguing setup for the tumult that follows. The adultery between John and Cynthia has the usual consequences and creates the usual accusations of betrayal, but the movie, and I think the audience, is more interested in Graham's sexual pastimes. Unable to satisfy himself in the usual ways, he videotapes the sexual fantasies of women and then watches them. This is a form of sexual assault. He has power not over their bodies, but over their minds, over their secrets. And I suspect that the most erotic sentence in his vocabulary is, "She's actually telling me this stuff." And so since that was kind of a critical thing, I wanted to get something more positive because he did like it. So later in the review, he says, Spader's performance throughout the film is a kind of risk-taking. Can you imagine the challenge an actor faces in taking the kind of character I have described and making him not only intriguing but seductive? Spader has the kind of sexual ambiguity of the young Brando or Dean. He seems to suggest that if he bypasses the usual sexual approaches, it is because he has something more interesting up or down his sleeve. So I thought his characterization of that as sexual assault was really interesting.
I was trying to make sense of it in my head because he filmed all these confessions with consent. So I'm not really sure how he could call it sexual assault.
Right. And that was why I wanted to get the later part where I don't know that Ebert is saying that this character is like a sexual predator per se. Or certainly I don't think he's saying that the movie endorses that idea because he's very positive on the movie. But watching it for me this time, I thought, you're right. He does do all of that stuff with consent. And so I don't think he's necessarily a sexual predator, but you do have to wonder, like, what is the dynamic there with those women and how many of them we don't really see other than our two main characters, anyone going through this, but he's got all these videotapes and who might have felt pressured to do something like that.
Well, here's where I'm going to refute that claim.
Yeah.
Because when Andie MacDowell's character wants to make tape, he tries to talk her out of it, saying, hey, I don't think you would ever make this decision if you weren't in this state of mind. So at that point, then all I can go on is what evidence we have before us. George.
Right. That's true. Although I think you could argue that he says that because he knows that saying that is exactly what he should be saying to get her to do it.
I don't know, man. Now you're really, looking all types of subversion that maybe I'm just not bright enough to get.
I don't mean to imply that, but no, I mean, I think
you've assaulted my intelligence.
I did. No, I think my point is that even if he's not coercing women per se, I watched this movie thinking that this is James Spader's character, is a creep. And maybe he's not like a predator, but he's not like a likable guy.
Well, I mean, now let me defend our old boy Graham here, okay?
Yeah.
First of all, okay, like I said, he has consent for all of these videos.
True.
Secondly, he promises to never show them to anyone. And as far as we know, he's never shown any of the videos to anyone. So he's kept up his end of the deal. And when people have asked him, he's told them, like, no, I can't show you them. This is my private thing with this person, So, and third of all, like, hey, man, different strokes for different folks. Do you want to go,
Sure. No, I mean, I agree with all of that stuff. That's all absolutely true. And he only shows, we're getting a little off track here, but he only shows Peter Gallagher's character the video at the end because he gets physically assaulted.
Yeah, he doesn't show him the video.
Right. He's
Peter
forced.
Gallagher, beats him up and takes the video. And
yeah.
puts it in.
Yeah. No, I think all of that stuff is true. And you're right about all of that. But at the same time, I just felt like if I met this guy in person, I'd be like, ugh, I don't want to talk to this guy. That was the vibe that I got. And I thought was kind of like the point.
Yeah.
But maybe it
Ebert's
wasn't.
saying, right. But Ebert's saying the exact opposite, which is, he's so seductive in his own ways. And I'm guessing that's not just towards women, that's towards people in general.
Right. That he's supposed to be that, charismatic. And I don't know. I didn't quite see it. But so Ebert was very positive. Some other people more mixed. Desson Howe in the Washington Post said, with some puns here at the beginning, which we always like in these reviews, canned goods frequently are damaged in transit by the hype machine. And Sex Lies, an arty, quote, small film, doesn't exactly hold up under the scrutiny. But awards or not, writer, director, editor Soderbergh has composed a wry, highly watchable piece that comes across as a great first effort by a film school graduate. The movie is welcome relief for what it doesn't do. It doesn't bear firearms, bend fenders, or bear grinning teeth. See Dennis Quaid's movies and try not to think of flossing. With its deadpan, non-commercial quality, not to mention shoestring budget, Sex Lies has an alternative feel. The performers, all of them unhistrionic, seem caught in an absorbing documentary rather than in a power acting drama. So his wordplay aside, he seems to feel like this is sort of, he's sort of damning it with faint praise, calling it like a good effort from a film student.
Well, the wordplay, I mean, dude, that review sounds perfectly dated from like the 80s.
Yeah, it does.
Who was the guy with the big hair and the mustache?
Oh, God, Gene Shalit.
Yeah, my brother always does a good impression of. Someone should have videotaped his mouth shut, or something like that.
Yeah, it's not quite that bad, but yeah,
Right.
I see what you're saying.
But I mean, I would say this as watching. We both watched so many Soderbergh movies. You can see he's kind of a prodigy, even in this movie. The way he moves the camera, really, really pretty scintillating and very mature stuff, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is far more than just like a film school type of effort, or like, oh, you can see that maybe next time he'll really get it right or something like that.
Yeah, and what's interesting, and I know you usually do 3.
I do have one more coming. Yeah,
Go for it, and then I'll.
Well, because I wanted a women's perspective, because especially given what Roger Ebert said about the sexual assault.
I'm glad you got a woman's perspective.
So Karen James in the New York Times quite liked it. She said, Mr. Soderbergh's astonishing first film is a liaison dangereuse for the video age, a rich, absorbing tale of sexual greed and fear, love, and betrayal, in which Graham's camera becomes a central player. It is an intricate dance of constantly changing partners whose connections are based on truth, self-denial, and outright deception. Sex Lies and Videotape, which won the grand prize at this year's Cannes Film Festival, comes loaded with advanced praise that seems impossible to meet. Amazingly, the film surpasses that. So she loved it.
And these are no lies. Yeah, what's funny is I feel like this is a very good example of a film that has outlived the criticism. Right?
Yeah, I think so. That was, to me, again, what I was expecting to see, just raves for it, and was surprised to see so much skepticism.
Yeah, the legend of the movie took on its own life, I guess. And the public, not the critics like you, Josh, the public had the last say.
I mean, the critics are part of the public. They're people too, man. Critics are people too.
Okay, Josh.
Did you have something else that you were about to get to there?
I wanted to say this. When we always do background. 9 days. He wrote this in 9 days on a cross country road trip. Who finds time to write when they're driving cross country? That's exhausting.
Well, maybe he was the passenger on the road trip.
He could have maybe done it into a dictaphone. He said he had been thinking about it for a year.
Yeah,
but still, pretty impressive to do it in 9 days. And yeah, I mean, we know he's more than just directing this one, right? He's got multi-credits with different names like he usually does.
Yeah, he was the editor. I think he actually didn't use pseudonyms at this point because he didn't need to, but he was the editor and not the cinematographer this time, right. I believe. But of course, he was also the writer, which he usually is not the writer on his films. He's only written a handful of other films.
I don't know, man. As a 26-year-old to pull this off, pretty awesome, dude.
Yeah, it is. What were we doing at 26? Not making Sex Lies and Videotape.
I made a short film called Sally Pepper's Neighborhood Detective,
which is it's a good effort for a film student.
Yeah, it was a good little film. It's still on YouTube, and definitely you would have to cut certain scenes today if I made that movie.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back and talk.
Not in like a creepy weird way, just in the times have changed.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. We can
not in a Graham sexual fetish. No, never mind.
We'll come back and talk more about Sally Peppers. We'll get into our general thoughts on Sex Lies and Videotape in a moment. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1989, we are talking about the Palme d'Or winner at the Cannes Film Festival, Steven Soderbergh's Sex Lies and Videotape.
Josh, you know what I did during the break?
No.
Kabuki.
That was some really quick kabuki.
Yeah. Well, hey man, there's no length or limit on art.
Yeah. I can't argue with that. So, did you like
Focus,
Sex,
Josh.
Lies, and Videotape?
I did.
Did you take what you had learned in your class and bring it to watching this film?
I think I would have to, there are certain things that stick with you about a filmmaker, and he is so character driven. And I mean, there are so many actresses we could list who have probably given their best performances in a Soderbergh movie. And I would bet you that either one of these two would count as that,
And James Spader too, really.
Yeah, I keep thinking of Secretary Spader when I see this, because it's a but he's yeah, I mean, all the acting. You don't like Peter Gallagher though.
I mean, it's not that I don't like Peter Gallagher. I think that character is the most kind of one-dimensional in this movie, and he's fine. He's not bad in it, and he's obviously someone that Soderbergh liked. I mean, they did The Underneath together, which Gallagher was the star of.
He's perfect for that movie.
Yeah. And I'm not sure
it's
if
like a film noir-y.
Right, which is one of Soderbergh's, I think, least favorites of his own films. And I'm not sure if they've worked together more since then. I know Soderbergh likes to work with the same people a lot. But no, the performances are all strong, and I think Peter Gallagher does everything that he could do with that role. I know you like the alternate casting. Initially, Tim Daly was supposed to play that role, and I think he would have also been fine. I don't think there's just not as many dimensions to that part.
I think that's fair, because even when you see, his reunion with Graham for the first time, it's very like, hey, Graham, remember when we were in college and there were parties?
What
like,
voice is that?
Peter Gallagher. Kabuki Peter Gallagher?
I haven't even seen the movie, and I know that's not the voice.
I'm from Boston, but I'm a dad on the OC. I don't know.
Yeah, no.
I got nothing on Peter. I don't have a Peter Gallagher impression. I'm going to admit it.
And I mean, that's okay. Who does have a Peter Gallagher impression? But beyond Peter Gallagher, I mean, you're right. Andie MacDowell and Laura San Giacomo, and this was Laura San Giacomo's like first role. They're both fantastic.
She had to fight for the role. The backstory on this is that she was with the same agency as Elizabeth McGovern, who the role was written for, the Anne role that
Andie MacDowell's role,
played.
yeah.
And Elizabeth McGovern's agents hated the script so bad they wouldn't even show it to her. And then Andie MacDowell wanted to do it, but Soderbergh was like, really, Grayskull? Because he didn't think that she had like kind of the depth, and then she earned the part because and then San Giacomo was like, I'm gonna leave the agency if you don't let me take this part, and she got it.
Yeah, and it was a smart move on all of their parts, because this is, like you said, so even now looking back on these actors, it's probably one of the first things that comes to mind in terms of their best work, and they are fantastic. The plot here, we kind of danced around. James Spader plays Graham, who is the old college friend of Peter Gallagher's character, and they haven't seen each other. John, there you go. Even his name is boring.
Yeah.
And they haven't seen each other in 9 years, and he comes back to town. It's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and gets involved a bit with John's wife, Anne, played by Andie MacDowell, and her sister Cynthia, played by Laura San Giacomo. Emotionally involved, yes, and through his weird predilection for making these videotapes of women talking about their sex lives.
He's impotent,
as he says. I mean, he's self-described as impotent, and you have to wonder if that's maybe just a thing that he says to make himself seem non-threatening.
Man, you are really not high on this Graham character at all.
I mean, I'm high on him as a character. I just think like if he was a person that I personally knew, I would not want to associate with him.
So, he meets these women and talks to them and gets to know them on maybe a deeper emotional level than John.
Yeah, John clearly does not care about the feelings of the women around him.
John is already having an affair with Cynthia, played by Laura San Giacomo. So the sister,
right?
And sister. So that's an important part. I don't know if you mentioned that.
I didn't, but that is, yeah. They're all sort of entangled. The four of these people are all in this kind of round robin of sexual whatever.
Right. And Anne becomes, I would say, emotionally attached to Graham and protective of him in a not a healthy way, I'd say.
No one in this movie is healthy. There's the one line where Graham says, that compared to John and Anne and Cynthia, he feels healthy, but he's wrong. They're all quite not
That's
healthy.
You know, remind me of that point because I wanted to talk about the dialogue a little bit, but so you know, so Anne kind of is possessive of Graham, and she doesn't want Cynthia. She already might know that Cynthia and John are having an affair, or maybe she hasn't.
She strongly
to
suspects
it.
it. Yeah,
she doesn't want Cynthia to meet Graham. She finds out about the videos, and she's disgusted and turned off personally. I'm not even saying sexually, just turned off, you know, from a personal level on him. And then the next day, Cynthia goes and finds Graham, even though I don't know how she found Graham, but she found Graham, and she makes a video. And I think that kind of probably breaks her sister's heart more than the affair with her husband at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Anne cares a lot more about her relationship with Cynthia than she cares about with her husband. I mean, to the point where you have to wonder, like, how and why did those people get married in the first place? They don't seem to have any kind of connection, even in the past.
Yeah, Cynthia's not a good sister.
No, I mean, none of these really are very good people.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's true. I mean, they have this level of competition where Cynthia wants to sleep with John, not because she seems to like him at all, but just because he's her sister's husband.
I kind of like how detached she is on that. And, you know, they're talking about, they get the mama present, which Anne buys, and Cynthia's going to, you know, pay her part. And you could have figured that she bought her like a sundress.
Right.
But I think no matter what she would have bought her, she would have just been like, "Ugh, that's what you picked out." Great.
Right.
You know, that.
Right. Yeah. She's very judgmental of Anne, and Anne is very judgmental of her. I mean, they both are. And there's a speech later. Anne's thing is that she is sort of not engaged in sex. She feels like sex is overrated. I think if this movie were made today, we would identify her as asexual. But there's a point later in the movie where she says, in part, she doesn't want to be a sexual person because Cynthia is so sexual, and she doesn't want to be associated with the way that Cynthia behaves in any way.
Right. There, you wonder, and I'm guessing they worked it out, but what's the backstory between those two? They got to be a little more than competitive, right? To have that much of a love-hate relationship.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of backstory that just isn't touched on here. And I don't know if Soderbergh or the actors kind of worked some of that stuff out. But again, I think just like the idea of Anne and John and how did they fall in love? Why did they get married? Like, what kind of connection did they ever have? Even John and Graham, the idea that they were friends in college. And they mentioned that a little bit and talk about how Graham has changed, but it's still hard to envision them as having been friends even at a time in the past.
Yeah, I could see that. I think one of the reasons why I could see John and Anne married is this is Baton Rouge. This is what, the capital city of Louisiana. It feels very small town, right?
True, it does.
So it's almost like, hey, this is it, man. This is what you do. This is the best it's going to get. And at least he's got a good job, and, you know, I'll have a nice home or something.
Right. And she talks about that when Graham asks her, when he first comes to their house, and he says, what do you like about being married? And she doesn't mention anything about John as a person. She says she likes their house and his job and the security.
Right.
And she doesn't even say that he's nice to her or anything like that.
And he's not, I mean, look, other than the affair he's having with the sister.
Well, that's
he's not
nothing.
Mean to her. They're just so disconnected from each other.
Right, right. I mean, I think he gets a little mean at later in the movie when he thinks that she's sleeping with Graham or something is going on there. But yeah, he's not necessarily a horrible person, or he's not an abusive husband or anything like that.
They're just in a marriage that shouldn't be.
Right. They never should have gotten married in the first place, which is why you kind of wonder how that came about.
Yeah.
But this is a movie that really lives in the moment. It's not concerned necessarily with that. It's about the relationships that are occurring at the particular moment. And I think in those moments, it works very well.
Yeah. Anne, though, not necessarily a character that lives in the moment, as we learned from her therapy scene up front, right? Where she's got some great like lines that maybe aren't supposed to be funny, but are really funny, you know? She says, being happy isn't so great. The last time I was happy, I gained 25 pounds, right? That's very revealing of the character. And then the therapist asks her if she masturbates, and she says, it just seems so stupid, especially when you don't know what to do with all the garbage, because she's fixated on what's going to happen to all the world's garbage.
Right.
Know?
I mean, I feel like, you know, she has a lot of that is, again, I think what we would say now is that she has anxiety, that she's asexual, a lot of these kind of more defined terms that would be in a movie like this that was made now.
Define what you think is asexual, because she does have some sexual desires in here.
Right.
You're just saying she just had a very low sex drive, or what do you?
Well, I mean,
what are you implying
I don't know that. I mean, she does seem to have a low sex drive, or it's not even that. I think the idea that she doesn't see the value, she's not drawn to having sex. It's not that she wishes that she could be having passionate sex and she's not with John because their relationship is dead. Just sex in general holds no appeal to her. And so I think that, and the idea that like, that's not necessarily like a dysfunction that has to be fixed, is something that you kind of think of that goes along with that.
So in the end, when she and Graham get together and we think they do have sex, and
do they though? Is that what you got out of that scene?
I think so.
Okay.
And even if not, they become a couple. You think?
Yeah, they do
right?
appear to be a couple of some kind.
And
at the end
do
of the
we
movie.
think? Are you? And she was the aggressor in that scene where they kind of had their sexual liaison.
Right.
Do you think that going forward, that couple is a sexless couple, or do you think that for whatever reason they found a spark within one another?
Well, I feel like they didn't have sex in that scene, and that maybe they are compatible because of their alternative sexual desires, that neither of them are really interested in having sexual intercourse. Graham wants that distance, and he just wants to, he's sort of a voyeur of some kind, and he wants to hear about people's desires and not participate. And she maybe doesn't want to participate either, but they find a closeness emotionally, and that's what works for them. Also, again, like I said, Graham is a total creep, and I didn't want to see them get together at the end, and I feel like that is not going to work out any better for her than being married to John.
I'm surprised how judgmental you are towards Graham, because I do think they have at least laid out the beats on how he became what he became, right? Because he was in love and he kind of pushed the woman away, and he was a pathological liar. And so he didn't want to become attached to anyone for these next 9 years. And that's what, whether it's mental or true or not, that's what's caused his impotence. And that's why he has gone on to become this voyeur.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying the movie doesn't give you an understanding of who he is. I just feel like I understand that he's not a pleasant person to be around.
Steven Soderbergh said, that all four of these characters, at one point he could have been them. So
yeah.
So what you're saying is you personally don't like Steven Soderbergh as a person.
Well, I mean, that's just one aspect of him, right? Though
that we know about.
Yeah.
So I mean, you saw Schizopolis. There's a lot.
That's true. There's a lot going on with Steven Soderbergh that is hard to comprehend. So I mean, I think just because I wouldn't want to personally be friends with Graham doesn't mean that I don't find him an interesting character or that I don't think the movie is interesting to watch.
I think Graham has one line in that meeting in the cafe with Anne that like pretty much sums up the theme of the movie, whether it was accidental or on purpose. He said he had read somewhere that men love who they are attracted to, and women become more attracted to people they love or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
That pretty much sums up these relationships really succinctly.
Yeah, and I think that actually could account for what you were asking about Anne, is that because she feels this emotional attachment to Graham that she clearly either never felt or doesn't feel anymore with John, that she can maybe allow herself to have some sort of sexual attraction. So I mean, maybe we'd call her demisexual now in the kind of world of these
is that someone
identity terms.
Only sexually attracted to Demi Moore?
Well, clearly.
I don't know demisexual.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what that one is, Dave?
No, sir.
It's a term people use for only having sexual attraction to someone that they have an emotional bond with first.
Oh,
so right, which is it's a cool, fairly common thing that people have decided needs a term.
Now I understand why I don't know what it means.
Anyway, do we want to talk about Steven Soderbergh's filmmaking techniques in this film?
I think he really moved the camera, maybe not as like smoothly as we see in future, but very confidently and with purpose. Everything is with purpose, I think. And look, this is four people talking for the most part with some sex interludes, right?
Yeah,
But
but
it basically takes place in a house, right? Or an
yeah, and then in
apartment.
an apartment, yeah.
But he's always moving the camera in such an interesting way. Like he's just like very mature as a 26-year-old who has never made a feature before.
Yeah, and I think I was also impressed with the way he overlaps sound and dialogue in this movie.
Sound design is so critical to this film. I made a note of that. I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think it gets the credit it deserves, but the sound design is very important to this film.
Yeah, the way the dialogue from one scene continues over another scene, or in some cases, dialogue from a scene we don't see is playing over a scene that we're not hearing. And I mean, there's a lot of really strong French New Wave influences
Right.
here, which I think is something that he kept going. I mean, it's not really in this movie, but the use of jump cuts that especially is a huge thing in Out of Sight. And you can see all of that coming to bear here in his first film.
There's also these weird sounds that play throughout the movie, like kind of creepy sounds. And when Anne's in the car after she kind of figures out the truth and she's just like breathing into her hands, you hear these like weird sounds and it really brings up the anxiousness of the film.
Yeah, one of the other weird things in this movie, and I don't know if this was a purposeful thing or even maybe just a budget thing, but whenever people have phone conversations, the person on the other end of the phone, it sounds like a voiceover and not like someone on a phone.
Yeah, you never really hear them. And yeah, that's an interesting.
I mean, so it sounds like they're speaking from like a god level rather than from like the phone.
I wonder if that was done on. I think that was probably budgetary, but I don't know.
But I think it works with the overall sound design of the movie in that we're hearing voices oftentimes that come from elsewhere and that they feel like this intimate glimpse into what the characters are thinking, even if it's just a phone conversation.
Yeah, the movie is so different and unique. I could totally see if you saw this, you would think one way or the other. Either this guy's like the next It director, or we're never going to ever hear from this guy again. And I think either would have been probably a fair bet back in 1989.
Well, yeah, and I think there are plenty of examples of, especially after this movie, in the 90s when that indie boom just exploded. And there were so many directors like that who kind of were able to jump on that bandwagon and maybe made one really interesting film and just were never able to recapture that. And that's definitely not the case for Soderbergh, as we'll talk about. But
and have talked about.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. What other aspects of this movie really appeal to you, if any? Peter Gallagher's eyebrows?
They're very good, those eyebrows. I think even though we don't see much of Baton Rouge, I think the environment is very clear and like it's hot and muggy and just kind of like sticky, which all these characters kind of are as well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think so. I think and that was something that I hadn't remembered about the movie, but as I was watching it, I thought it has a really good sense of place.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they shot it in Baton Rouge, but
because he's from there.
Oh, is he? Okay. Well, then he definitely has an understanding of that area.
Yeah. I mean, and then when we get to like Out of Sight and Traffic, like the way he stylizes place, like incredible stuff, you know? So the other thing that I think is worth mentioning is the way he constructs Act 3 after Peter Gallagher's character, you know, after John goes and kicks Graham out of his own house to watch the video from Sex Lies and Videotape. So of his wife Anne, you know, and so he's watching Anne's video and we're watching it with him.
Yeah.
And then we're not watching it with him. We're actually in the moment of the video. We're no longer on a black and white television taped recording.
It's a color television.
It is a colored television. Okay, fair enough. But we're no longer in that. Now we're actually in the scene as it's happening. And that's where, you know, I got the impression that they did have sex and you had the impression that they didn't.
Right. I mean, there's a lot elided there. And that is a very interesting technique because earlier in the movie, we see sort of the lead up to that. And then Soderbergh cuts away from it. And we are back at home with John and Anne. And we wonder, are we going to actually ever see what happened between Anne and Graham? And then we do, of course, as we circle back, even though we don't see all of it. We see it up to the point where he stops the camera and we have to kind of imagine what happens in that period. And yeah, that's a very very interesting technique, and I think something that he used later in something like Out of Sight, where it's a kind of non-linear approach to storytelling.
Right. Where the J-Lo and Clooney kind of love story and how that's pieced together.
Yeah, and which is just so well done.
Yeah, we clearly like that film.
Yeah, Out of Sight is great. And as are many Soderbergh movies.
Yes.
So should we rate this out of 4 sexually explicit videotapes?
5 of them, right?
Oh, out of 5. Yeah, I don't know why I said that.
I'm gonna give it 3.5 again.
Yeah, I am too. I do think there's some rough aspects of this movie.
I don't mind that when you see that from the early director that's gone on, like we've talked about with Clerks,
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think in a way, with Soderbergh, you can see how he developed so much more. Right. Whereas with Kevin Smith, not so much.
Yeah.
But no, I do like this movie, and I think in a way, this movie, maybe despite its acclaim and its position in indie film, because Soderbergh is so prolific and has made so many notable movies, that this movie has gotten a little lost, maybe, when people go back to his films.
I'm going to disagree with you because, again, when you think of the indie film movement, this was so pivotal to make it what it became. And I think it does get that reverence. So, and that was why when you and I were talking before this episode, I thought maybe we should have someone who knows this who is like you and I were kids. We couldn't have seen this, but a film fan who remembers when this did break in the theater and what that was like, because I don't think there were many like indie movies that did this before that, and definitely not festival movies that did this before.
Right. Yeah, certainly at the time that was a major impact, but I guess I feel like maybe it's slightly lessened, but that's a good point to take a moment, and then we'll come back and talk more about the legacy of Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1989, we're talking about the Cannes Palme d'Or winner, Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And just before the break, we were saying this movie is known for like changing the status of indie film. And at the time that it came out, it sort of put indie films on the map, I guess we could say.
I think indie film became appointment films the way we think of like blockbusters are now, and blockbusters were then. But this was a smart, intelligent adult drama that people could go and see and talk about afterwards. Not that those didn't happen before, but again, from a film festival standpoint, this is going to always be regarded as like one of the all-time gems to ever come out of a film festival scene.
Yeah, I think so. And we talked earlier about how this made Sundance into a much bigger deal.
Yeah, of course, Pulp Fiction we had mentioned, but Pulp Fiction had already, we had already had Reservoir Dogs. I almost think of like Sling Blade, because that just came so far out of nowhere and became such a kind of like beloved piece of film of the year that it came out, 96, that's something that I would relate it to. But yeah, I don't know, man. Again, we were too young to really feel its impact, but the reverberations we're still feeling today.
Right. And I think that was my point, is that at the time it was this movie and everyone was interested in this movie. And the legacy in a way is just that like, movies like this are able to find that audience, but this movie specifically doesn't get that level of attention.
Someone
anymore.
had to be the pioneer.
Right.
This was the pioneer. But I think people do realize that. I think you're but maybe you're right. Maybe I'm giving people too much credit, and you're right that they're dumb idiots who don't know anything.
That's not what I was saying.
I think somewhere in between where both of you guys are right now on this particular topic, I think Sex, Lies, and Videotape, like for me, like I said, I'd never actually seen it. And this is like one of those indie movies you always know about growing up, but then you never quite get around to.
Right. I think that's the idea.
Does this podcast make you want to see the movie, Dave?
It actually really does.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Hey, one other question I had, because we were kids at the time.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of this was taboo sexually.
It was a very titillating title.
Right. Yeah. Certainly the title is very eye catching. And I imagine that did probably push some boundaries, even though, I mean, it's all talking, as we're saying. And even in the sex scenes, there's no nudity.
Right. So I wonder, speaking of that titillating title, I had read that this movie was playing in West Germany when the Berlin Wall fell down, and a bunch of East Germans had flooded over. And when they saw the title, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, they thought, oh, Western porn. What was that? That wasn't even, ja, guten Tag.
Even better than your Peter Gallagher impression.
Where is Germany? I'll be here. No, that's still Schwarzenegger. But they went to it. I can do German. It's just not there. Right
yeah, just do Werner Herzog.
Very good. We will watch the Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
There you go.
And then we will examine our innermost thoughts. Why has it taken us so long to make these videotapes? What do the tapes mean in the grand scheme of things? In the end, we will all just perish to dust.
Yeah.
So anyway, they thought they were going to go see
porn, and then they saw this instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Steven Soderbergh, we mentioned, we rattled off a bunch of his films, and I mean, he's incredibly prolific.
Down.
What?
The wall came down.
We can stop with this now.
We were gonna get
I regret suggesting you do it that way.
Titillation, sexual liberation. But instead, what did we get? A man with a video camera who had to hide his own sexual proclivities in the privacy of his own apartment.
All right. Really? Just stop.
Stream of consciousness, Werner.
Yeah, Herzog. I have to give you, that is a good Werner Herzog impression. I'll give you that. Do we want to talk about, what's your favorite Steven Soderbergh movie?
Yeah. Well, we mentioned, I think Out of Sight probably is, but
yeah,
I'm going to mention one other one as the most underrated one.
Yeah.
The Limey.
Right.
Which also came out in that 98 to 2000 period. Traffic's amazing, I think. Brockovich is great. Of the early movies, I thought King of the Hill is really good.
King of the Hill is so good. I love King of the Hill.
Yeah, so there you go. So and I mean, he's done some good stuff lately. Behind the Candelabra was very good.
Yeah, that was really good. You mentioned Out of Sight. I like Ocean's 11 a lot. I mean, that was probably his most polished blockbustery kind of thing, but as that kind of movie, it's so entertaining. It's so much fun. I really like some of his less regarded films. I like The Good German a lot.
That was all right.
And his version of Solaris. He works very, very well with George Clooney, obviously.
Right.
As we mentioned. And I thought it was interesting that, again, he did write this, and we talked about how he wrote this movie in 9 days on a road trip. But for the most part, although he's incredibly multi-talented and he usually functions as his own cinematographer and his own editor, he rarely writes his own films. And some of his other writing credits on his films include King of the Hill, Schizopolis, of course.
So the early ones he was writing more.
Yeah, The Underneath, which is one that he's kind of disowned. And then Solaris, which was the last film of his that he wrote, which was back, I think, in like 2002. But he works closely with, I mean, people like Scott Z. Burns, I think, has written a bunch of his films. Scott Frank, I think, has written a few. So, I mean, he obviously has people that he works with, that he has established a relationship, just as he has with actors like George Clooney, but that he himself is not usually a writer. And maybe, I don't know if he thinks of himself as a writer.
Speaking of that, Cliff Martinez composed the score for this, and that was his first ever feature film score. And apparently, I didn't even realize that he's worked with Soderbergh on a ton of things.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely knew that. In fact, it was interesting when I saw his credit on here, and I thought, oh, wow, even going back to this, they worked together.
Yeah.
I mean, was it Traffic, I think? Did Cliff Martinez win an Oscar for that, maybe?
Traffic's a great movie and deserved all the Oscars that it won. And that was the year Soderbergh beat himself for
with
Best
Aaron
Director.
Brockovich, yeah.
So that tells you how good he was. They just were like, we're going to just vote him over him, So, but he did that run from 98 to 2000 of Out of Sight, The Limey, Aaron Brockovich, and Traffic. Like, man, 4 home runs in a row.
Yeah, and wasn't Ocean's 11 right after that?
Yes, it was. So, and then, so I would say that Ocean's 11 is probably like the beginning of like period 3, and now we're in like period 4 of Soderbergh or something.
Yeah, this
like
kind
that.
of post-retirement period, and especially now where, I mean, he has made, I think, like 4 movies since sort of returning from retirement,
Yeah.
but where he's really also interested in these like alternative forms of media. He made that series Mosaic for HBO that was sort of an interactive thing.
Doing a lot of stuff on Netflix for lower budgets now.
Yeah. And he's really interested, as Dave hates, in not having his movies in theaters. Like High Flying Bird, which was his Netflix movie from 2019, or one of his 2 Netflix movies from 2019.
Yeah, I haven't watched
specifically,
The Laundromat yet.
The Laundromat is not too great. And actually, I feel like his post-retirement period has been sort of underwhelming, although I love High Flying Bird.
Well, where does the retirement happen from?
I mean, movie-wise,
Is it
it's
Lucky Logan?
Logan Lucky, and Unsane, and then High Flying Bird and The Laundromat are the films that he's done then.
Yeah.
But also he's worked on The Nick and on Mosaic and maybe some other weird alternative kind of projects.
Yeah, I feel like I liked Unsane, but I don't even remember it right now because that and Contagion and Side Effects all kind of blend together for me.
Oh yeah, I see. I think Contagion and Side Effects are really good.
Yeah,
and good examples of his sort of later period, just random stuff. But Unsane, which looks terrible, like visually, the worst shot on iPhone kind of thing, and stilted performances, and I just really dislike that.
Well,
movie.
you and I both like Haywire, the Gina Carano like B action movie.
That one's a lot of fun, and I think, like you mentioned before, getting great performances out of people. And Gina Carano is someone who that was, I think, her first role, or certainly her first major role, and who has done some B-movie stuff since then and maybe struggled to transition from her MMA career into acting. But Soderbergh knew exactly what to do with her and got a really good performance out of her.
He's got another movie coming out, Let Them All Talk?
Yeah, it's an HBO Max. So I know the HBO Max itself doesn't launch, I think, until sometime in the spring, in April or something. But
yeah, okay. So he's still directing even though he's retired.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't think he says that he's retired. It's just he said he was for a while and then he came back. And yeah, his next movie, after doing 2 Netflix movies, he's sort of switching streaming services and doing an HBO Max movie for when that service launches. And it seems like he's kind of lost interest in theatrical releases after Logan Lucky and Unsane didn't make money, and he had these like alternative plans for how to promote them that didn't work out. And I think he's kind of disillusioned with the idea of even releasing movies in theaters anymore.
Well, he's so prolific. Maybe he's just like, hey, I can just have my own workshop of films. And this for me is like, I can just keep making movies and people keep paying me a lot of money. And that's all I want to do,
Right. But I think he is interested in, he takes an interest in the business side of it and the distribution side of it.
And we saw that with Logan Lucky as a big thing. But what I'm thinking is, like, with these streaming services, they're probably not noting him to death and making him do, hey, Steven, baby, it has to be this way, right? So he's getting to explore the art, which is really what he's about.
That's true. And that level of freedom can be great and, can be maybe not as great.
So we mentioned, we're going to say Ocean, I would say Out of Sight, and we all know Aaron Brockovich, Out of Sight, Traffic, and The Limey are maybe, and then we like King of the Hill right there as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen The Limey in a really long time. And again, I do like a lot of those later movies a lot, like Side Effects and Contagion. I really like Solaris. I mean, I feel like we could just go through every one of his movies, and there are an odd lot that I don't care for. One that we didn't mention is Full Frontal, which is, quote, the unofficial sequel to Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
And I feel like I must have seen it, but I have no recollection. Tell me about this.
I mean, I saw it when it came out, and I don't remember a lot. What I remember is that it was very poorly reviewed, and I liked it. But I think it's possible that I had not seen Sex, Lies, and Videotape at the time that I saw it.
Was this like just like one of these ensemble, like, little story here, little story there type pieces?
I mean, I think I don't think it has really anything at all to do with Sex, Lies, and Videotape, other than like he said that and people kind of took him at his word. It's a film industry story, I think, and is one of these things where he just came up with some weird stuff and called in favors from all of his famous friends. It was right after that period of the movies that you were mentioning, Aaron Brockovich and Traffic and Ocean's 11, where he had so much clout that he could get, Julia Roberts and people like that to show up to just do whatever random stuff he wanted.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey man, Julia Roberts, right? Aaron Brockovich. Again, we're talking about an actress who's a great actress who achieved even greater heights with Steven Soderbergh. And didn't that year he won? Did he win? I mean, not just director. Traffic won Best Picture, right? Or was that stupid Gladiator the year that Gladiator won?
I am not sure.
But she won for Erin Brockovich, and did Catherine Zeta-Jones win for Best Supporting Actress in Traffic that year?
Possibly, yeah.
Or maybe it was Chicago.
We're not sure about any of this.
Okay,
stuff, but he made a lot of movies that were very highly acclaimed.
Here are two things I wanted to mention, just kind of like if maybe film history goes a completely different way if this doesn't happen. One was that this wasn't even supposed to play in competition at Cannes. Cannes, another film wasn't finished in time, so they just slotted this in, and it ended up, helping build a legend. And I thought this was funny. On the first day of filming, they say that producers sent Steven Soderbergh a telegram on the first day of filming Sex, Lies, and Videotape saying, "We heard you couldn't even direct Traffic," and then
he directed Traffic
and won an Oscar for it.
So, good stuff.
But you were saying how he's critical, maybe sometimes a little asshole-ish towards his own movies. Like, I found this quote about Sex, Lies, and Videotape from Steven Soderbergh. He said it looks like it's made by someone who wants to think deep but really isn't. Response is indicative of the fact that there was so little else for people to latch onto out there, which I think is bullshit, because we picked this year, 1989, because there's so many good movies that came out this year.
But I mean, it certainly is. There's so little else in the sense of movies that are like this. And that's why it created that sensation and sort of led to that boom of indie films. I mean, it was a unique thing at the time that it came out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a seminal and an important film in the history of cinema.
It is. Do we want to talk about the legacy of these actors' careers, who are all, I feel like, this is sort of the height of their abilities in a lot of ways. And all of them are steadily working actors, but none of them really. Spader is the most high profile.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, he was a bad guy in Avengers, so I think he's like had some movie starish brushes anyway, right?
Yeah, but I mean, he's done more TV. I mean, he was did Boston Legal, and he currently does The Blacklist.
Right, he's a big star.
Yeah, but he's a big TV star.
Yeah, but he was so charming on Boston Legal. Like, I thought he was great on that.
He was great. I mean, that character kind of became a parody of itself, and that's really David Kelly's fault and not James Spader's fault. But that happens a lot with David Kelly. But no, I mean, I think he also, James Spader, maybe this is part of why I feel turned off by Graham as a person, because he has this legacy of playing creeps. That's like his thing.
I think that, but you love Crispin Glover.
Do I? I don't know where you got that from.
I felt like if I said it confidently enough, you'd just go along with it.
No, that's not true. And it's not that I don't like James Spader. I think
Crispin Glover.
Yeah.
He's good. He's good at playing characters who give you that kind of creepy feeling.
Yeah. All these actors, like you said, Andie MacDowell was the biggest star, I'd say. Right?
Yeah.
Romantic lead, Groundhog's Day. Come on, man.
Yeah, Groundhog Day is great.
Yeah, but where's she now? I looked her up and I was like, she's really not doing much at all.
No, but she is doing stuff. It's just not. I mean, she was on like a Hallmark show for several seasons.
Oh, yeah.
She just did some indie film with Chris O'Dowd that I think got some festival acclaim, and she works. I think all of them do.
They are.
Laura San Giacomo works. Peter Gallagher works. It's just not stuff that really makes a lot of an impact.
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, we do love Sandy Cohen from the OC. Don't do an impression. Don't even start. I can see you winding up to it and just don't.
You got to be a good guy. I don't know.
No. But we do love the OC.
Benjamin, you've come out here to the OC.
No.
What is out for you?
Stop with the Werner Herzog, please.
Ocean is the frontier. You can go through the vast expanse of the entire universe just down here in Orange County.
just please. One last thing I wanted to mention, because Jason, you are such an Adam Sandler fan, that Stephen Brill, who plays the kind of annoying guy at the bar in this movie, went on to a career as director of many bad Adam Sandler movies. And it just is such a random thing in this movie.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, director of Little Nicky and Sandy Wexler. And he's one of Sandler's go-to guys.
Yeah, you almost like the lines are so hacky that he has as this barfly. You almost wonder if they were just like his own hacky lines, right?
It could be, He's definitely no Steven Soderbergh.
I like this. There were a lot of alternative titles for this movie.
Yeah.
My favorite was 4602, which was the length of the video that Anne made for Graham.
Oh yeah, that's a terrible title.
Well, it was my favorite of the
other ones
alternative
must have been even
titles.
worse.
They weren't good.
This is a great title. As we're saying, this is so eye-catching in that you can't read this title and not be intrigued.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, hey, they should have named it that, dude.
Okay.
God.
All right.
Unbelievable, dude.
Wow. That's so touchy there. All right. Well, I guess maybe that'll be our note to end on. Unless you wanted to read off some more titles or something.
I don't have them with me, Josh.
All right. Well, then that is Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Have you ever lied in a bed with a potter plant on your penis?
I have not, but I did appreciate that after that, she took the plant home with her.
Oh, there you go.
That was good. She got something out of it.
Fair enough.
So that's Sex, Lies, and Videotape. That is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can check us out on social media.
Yeah, social media. We're on it. AwesomeMovieYear.com and then Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Twitter, and then Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and then Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. There you go.
All right. And where are you on the social media, Jason?
Oh, I'm on all the social medias as Jason Harris Comedy or J Harris Comedy, which I think is my Twitter. Who knows even at this point? It's all going downhill. I'll be on Go for Jason. I'll eventually redesign that website.
All right.
.com. Who cares, Josh?
Somebody cares. I care.
Thanks, buddy.
I care. I am at joshbellhateseverything.com, at Signal Bleed on Twitter, and at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook. And listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
You can find us wherever you listen to this podcast, and also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, and join the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
What do we have on our next episode, Jason?
It is our box office flop, and it is a notorious box office flop. When you think of box office flops, this is the Sex, Lies, and Videotape of flops. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
Terry Gilliam's film. I'm looking forward to that because I had loved a lot of Terry Gilliam films, and I'm interested to revisit that. So tune in for The Adventures of Baron Munchausen next time. Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
And all points west.
Why did you even bother? This is all a waste of your time. You're just doing this just so you do not think about what it is you should really be thinking about.